Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our student finance event. Hopefully you're all here to hear the detail about student finance. You're all planning to go to university, an exciting next step in September this year. So we've got with us, we're really lucky to have our partner university for Anglia Ruskin, who do loads of activities with us, who have kindly offered to kind of explain how the student finance process works. I'm going to hand over in a minute to Louise, who's going to do the main presentation, but we've got other experts on the call here who will also be able to help answer your questions. Now, if you're not familiar with how these events work, there is a Q&A function, so you'll be able to see in the top right hand bit of your screen there's a little speech bubble with a question mark in there, so do put your questions in there. There might be some questions that you have that are more personal to you, so obviously we'll get a list of those and we can get back to you. So we do hope we explain it all well to you, and more information will follow. I'll let Louise explain. I don't, in the actual fact, applications aren't quite open yet, but I'll let Louise go into detail about that. So, and what I should have said right at the beginning is, apologies, is my name's Jo Bishop and I'm the Careers Manager for City and Islington College. So I'm going to hand over to Louise. Okay, Louise, if you want to try and share your screen. Oh, you're muted, Louise.
Do apologise. Okay, can you hear me now, Jo?
Yes, all fine.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you. So good evening, everyone. I just wanted to say, firstly, as Jo did, welcome to this evening's student finance talk for parents, and to say that I'm very thankful that you've given up your time with us to be with us this evening. And obviously, we understand that you're wanting to get some information out of this that's going to help you to help your child with the next stages in their transition to university. So we're hoping that this will be a session that you'll get great information from and helpful. We also have, as Jo mentioned, Cheryl with us. She's from our money advice team. She's going to be able to answer more of those sort of tricky, unusual questions. So just pop them in the question and answer section, and we'll go through those at the end of the session. My name is Louise, as Jo said, and I work for Anglia Ruskin University as a Schools and Colleges Development Officer, and my role involves going into schools and colleges normally to help with students and their parents with that support and guidance they need to make those next steps in their transition to higher education. Obviously at the moment everything's virtual, so here we are this evening chatting over the internet. One of the main parts, the information that I'm giving you today is correct as it stands. However, if your child is applying for university next year, then you would need to keep in mind that these details might change slightly. So just keep an eye on the Student Finance England website, and it's always good to have a double check of the figures nearer the time as well. With regards to the actual talk, the way that we'll be structuring it is we'll be looking at tuition fee loans, maintenance loans, the application for student finance, any additional support that might be available, and also looking at the repayments and how that works as well. So the maximum that a student can receive for their tuition fee loan, which is the part that pays for their studying, is £9,250 per year, and that's for a degree level course. It's important to know that this tuition fee isn't just paying for them to study a course, it also covers lots of other parts of university life. So 24-hour library service with staff, the books, and obviously with COVID, the ever-growing digital resources. There's also access to laptops and study spaces, state-of-the-art facilities as well. So the university is always updating with really good facilities that are used for some of our more interactive courses. So we have things like virtual wards for medical students and nursing students, and then we have labs, so lots and lots of facilities there. We also have specialist equipment, so 3D printers, building surveying equipment, music studios, and much more. So there's so much that the university put in to the study facilities. Also, with regards to education and academic staff, so we're paying lecturers who are experts in their field. They're not only offering classes, but they provide exceptional learning materials, individual tutorials, and also guidance for students all the way through their programme. So there's that one-to-one element at times as well. There are also the professional services, so people like Cheryl that are with us today who do money advice, and we also have other professional services like counselling, wellbeing, employability support, study support, and multi-faith, and much more. So there's so many services there, and all of that has to be paid for. So this all comes from the tuition fees that your child is paying for their studies. With regards to the actual tuition fee loan, they're not required to pay any money up front. I'm not sure how much information you would know if you've had any children that have gone to university before. So some of you may know this basic information and others may not. So we're starting from the beginning really. But yeah, so they're not required to pay anything up front, and it's non-means tested. And then all students have, as long as they meet the eligibility criteria, they will be eligible for the £9,250, which is the maximum they can receive. However, if their course is slightly lower, say for instance their course is £9,000 a year, they would still only receive the course, the fee for the course, so £9,000 a year in a loan. They wouldn't get the extra £250 to spend on something that they enjoyed. The other good thing is that the money is paid directly to the university. There's no concern about it going into the student's account that way and then being spent on something else. So you wouldn't have to worry about that kind of element of them spending it on something and then struggling to pay their university fees. What happens is once the student actually registers at university, the university then informs Student Finance England, and they then release the money to the university. And the loan comes from Student Finance England direct, and we recommend that you look them up before the application process and just have a look through their website and maybe look at some forums and things to get some advice on that a bit further. The other element of student finance is the maintenance loan, and this will cover things that will be sort of standard day-to-day living, so things like food, clothes and toiletries, cleaning products. It also would need to look at students' accommodation and bills. So depending on what they choose, whether they would go into a on-campus facility with an ensuite, it might be a bit more expensive than if they shared a bathroom. They might look at, in their second year, going into a student house. So they need to look at the elements of what the accommodation cost is in comparison to, and in the addition, bills as well, which they might not be used to budgeting for. So they need to be aware of all of those things, and we would say for them to really consider their budget. And then there's the additional things of travelling. So if they're commuting, looking at the commuting costs. So if they're living at home, how much is it going to cost them to go to university every day or 3 days a week? If they're living away from campus but still living away from home, they might still have a commuting cost. So looking at that. There's also the element of socialising, and obviously most students like to think that most of their budget will go on socialising, but that's not always possible. So we'd need to sort of encourage them to look at budgeting around whether they would be spending nights out or whether they would spend time at home with their friends watching a movie. So trying to balance that budgeting element of things. There are also lots of club societies and also the option of a gym membership. At ARU, the gym membership is subsidised. It's reduced, it's lower than most community gyms, so it might be worthwhile them looking at joining the university gym. And other universities probably offer the same thing. With regards to things like TV licence, they would also need to consider the cost of a TV licence. If they're in a communal area and there's only one TV and it's in the centre of the house, then they wouldn't have to pay for a separate TV licence. However, if they have a TV in their room that they're watching, they would need to pay, and the room is locked, they have a separate lock in their room, they would need to have a TV licence separately. Oh, sorry, gone ahead. And then obviously with mobile phones, we all know that most of the students will want the top iPhone, Samsung or other brands are available phone, and we need to sort of just let them know that obviously that needs to be budgeted into their day-to-day living. It might be that they wouldn't go for the newest phone, so that they could do more socialising. So it's more about them finding what balances well for themselves and what suits their lifestyle. But I'm sure that you've had these conversations with them many times. With regards to the maintenance loan, this is different from the tuition fee loan in the fact that it is partly means tested. And what that means is that a student will receive a minimum amount based on their household income. The household income is worked out by salary of the adults in the house. So that could be parent or carer. It could be a parent and the parent's partner. And also it's based on where the student is based mainly. So if they're living with one parent more than the other, it would be based on the income of that parent rather than the other parent. However, if they have 50-50, then it will be individual circumstance for that student. So it's worth looking into how that would work for you and your circumstances. The maintenance loan is paid to the students in 3 instalments throughout the year, and this differs to the tuition fee because it's paid straight to the student rather than to the university. So that's when this is the element that they really need to look at budgeting. For the 2021 and 2022 academic year, the minimum that a student will receive if living away from home would be £4,422. However, the maximum that a student will receive if they choose to live at home is £7,987. And if they decide to live away from home, the maximum they'll receive, as it says on the chart there, is £9,488. So obviously they take into consideration that students living away from home may have more costs than those living at home. This particular chart is quite handy just to sort of see how things look. The household contribution assumes that all students will need £9,488 per year. That's what the government has said a student needs to manage to live. On the left of the chart, there is the household income. And then on the right of the chart is the student budget, like we just said, 9,488. And the blue part explains, is the sliding scale depending on the household income of what the student will receive from student finance. So for instance, if we look at £25,000 at the top, so if the household income is £25,000 or less, the student will receive the full £9,488. So for example, if the joint income of the parents is, say, £50,000, that student will receive £6,092 from Student Finance England. If the household income comes between 2 of those figures, so say for instance, between £35,000 and £40,000, it will be somewhere between the £8,130 and the £7,450 that they will receive. So it depends on what the household income is to what the student will receive. Then if we look at the green part, this is the difference between the two sums. So the difference between what the government think the student needs to live on minus what the Student Finance England will provide. And this is the contribution that is recommended. It's called a recommended household contribution. It doesn't necessarily mean that it has to come from yourselves, from parents or carers. It is suggested that also it is possible for students to make this money through part-time work. If they don't want to work throughout the year when they're studying, maybe working through the summer and saving money to help support them through the year. And then there's also things like financial scholarships and bursaries that may be able to help them out. And there's lots of information available on those as well. But looking at the chart, obviously if a household income is over £62,286, the student will only receive that minimum amount of the £4,422. So that's worth keeping in mind as well. There are a few things that I just want to highlight in regards to the actual application process for student finance. So the first thing that Joe mentioned at the beginning was the deadlines. Normally this opens around the end of February, As Jo said, it's not open just yet. I'm not sure on the exact date, so maybe we'll ask Cheryl to confirm that in the question and answer section. But what we would say is that the application should be submitted before the deadline for student finance, which is normally around about the end of May, and that way the students are then guaranteed to receive their student finance for their start of academic year, which is normally around the end of September, early October time. If they submit and then confirm later, if they do not submit it and then try and apply later, it isn't guaranteed that they will receive that money before the start of term. So what we say is that it is important for the students to set up their student finance account online by going to the government website, student/student finance. And what they would need is some form of identification, so whether that's a passport number, bank details and things like that. There are also alternatives on the website, so worth having a look if they don't have a passport, what other documents they may be able to use. And then make that application as soon as possible. There is a section there that also parents and carers do need to complete, so that is something that you would have to support them with, and you would have to provide some household documentation as well, and some identification. So just keep that in mind, that they may be asking you to go online to help them to support with this application. They will also at the same time check the student's eligibility and how much that they'll receive. They'll verify all of that proof of identification, and that can take around about 6 weeks before any declaration paperwork is received. Even if your child isn't sure about university, we would still recommend that they apply for student finance based on where they may go to university and what course they are interested in. Just because if they try to apply later after the deadline or further closer to the deadline, it may take longer for that process to happen, and it wouldn't guarantee their income. However, if they do change their mind as they go along, or they have to go through clearing and they have to change university, or they decide to look at different courses and they change over to a different course, then it's very easy just to contact Student Finance England and get that course updated online. I think you can do it through the website as well. So those details can be changed easily, and it's much easier to actually get the application in and change than to leave it later and to sort of stress over the deadlines and things, or them not getting that money and struggling at the beginning of their university academic year. No money will be released by Student Finance England to the university or to the student until they're officially enrolled on their course. So the student will have to accept their place and register at the university for that money to be released. So if they decided for any reason they wanted to defer their place, then that application can be cancelled as well, and they wouldn't receive any student finance debt. Just in regards to eligibility criteria, and this is something you may have some questions over that we may be able to help with later. The majority of students don't have any issues for applying for student finance, but there is standard eligibility criteria which involves obviously the university or college that they're going to, the course, whether they've actually studied a higher education course before, things like their age, and also nationality or residency status. These are all things that they would consider. So it's worth either asking the questions now or having a look at the website for more information. In regards to additional support, there's a lot of additional support out there. So looking at the long courses, so every student is guaranteed 4 years of student finance funding. So for instance, with medicine, that's a 5-year course. They will receive 4 years of student finance, and then in their 5th year, they will receive an NHS bursary. With the social work students, they're given support from the 2nd year of study. And then general NHS healthcare courses, many of those courses actually do receive extra training grants, learning support, access to learning support funds. If they have dependent children, they have access to extra funds. There's also travel and dual accommodations expenses. I won't go into too much detail on those exact career paths. However, if you have a particular interest in that, pop it in the chat section, and we can give more detail about that, or pass your details on to the money advice team to give more specific details. With regards to long courses, as in that they run over longer period over the year, so into the summer, they may also receive extra finance to cover that period of time. There's also access to disabled student allowance and parents support. The disabled allowance doesn't just cover physical disabilities, it will cover things like ADHD, dyslexia, autism, even sort of mental health difficulties as well. So it's always worth them speaking to the wellbeing teams and seeing if they can have an assessment and support to go through the process and look at extra funds if there are any of those issues there, because that extra funding may help them to manage certain things and pressures that are there. With regards to adult dependent grant, that's relating to people who have caring responsibilities. So if they do have any caring responsibilities, they may look into that as an option. And also there's the Learning Support Fund, which is accessible to students in exceptional circumstances. So more information can be given about that. We would say the main email address for contacting the money advice team initially would be answers@anglia.ac.uk, and then that will be allocated through to the correct team to answer and respond to you. So make a note of that if you have any particular questions. Just in regards to actual additional support from ARU, we do have a bursary for students whose household income is less than £42,875 per year. This is up to £300 a year, and it doesn't have to be paid back. It's just to help provide that extra support to students that may need it. It's given to UK or EU students at the moment for both full and part-time courses, and also is available to students at all of our campuses, so Cambridge, Chelmsford and Peterborough. It's automatically awarded, so they wouldn't need to actually apply for that, but based on the details that they provide at application and through student finance, we would be able to see who's eligible for that. There's also a merit scholarship which is open to undergraduate students from the UK and EU. This is based more on academic achievement from previous studies, so they would automatically receive that if they met those requirements. And then also there is a sports scholarship, but I think that one has to be applied for. More information can be found on our website, so if you went to aru.ac.uk and looked for scholarships, there will be more information. Many universities do offer bursaries or scholarships. They do have different criteria as well, so it's definitely worth, when you're looking at universities, looking at what universities offer, what scholarships, and also how to apply for that and what the criteria is. They do change sometimes every year, so it's worth keeping up to date with the most up-to-date information when your child's applying to university. With regards to repayments, repayments only start from the April after the student officially graduates or finishes their course, and then the payments are only applicable if they start to earn over £26,575. So if they're earning less than that, they wouldn't have to pay anything. If they earn over that threshold, so if they're earning over £26,575, they start to pay 9% back of the amount over the £26,575. So the important thing to remember is that repayments are based on what is earned rather than what is owed. If they earn £27,800, for example, they would pay back around about £9.18 per month. So and also the other point to consider is that if they wanted to, say for instance, they wanted to travel, or they started earning under that threshold again by changing jobs, or there was a redundancy, or they went part-time, then if they went back under that threshold, they wouldn't have to pay anything until they start earning back over £26,575 again. Regardless of how much they've paid back, the loan will be cleared after 30 years from their graduation. So if the full 30 years of their salary, for the full 30 years, they were earning a salary of £26,574. They wouldn't have to pay anything back. However, the other important thing to consider is that it isn't seen as a bad debt to have student finance. Although it does have to be declared when people are applying for mortgages or loans, this is more to calculate the repayments that they're able to afford, rather than it wouldn't have a negative marker on their finance. It's more just to help schedule any further future payments that they have. So it's not seen as a bad debt. Sometimes it's seen more positively than other debts. And one of my colleagues actually tells a story of when she bought her house and her husband had a debt on his, like a payment that he'd missed, and that actually had more of a negative impact than her actually having a massive student loan, and he thought it would be the other way around. So it doesn't have the negative impact that most people think it will. Here are a few examples. So we're going to try and put this into a bit of perspective, because I know that sometimes the numbers and figures and percentages get a bit jumbled. So looking at Anisha here, she earns £35,000 per year. Now her income before tax is £2,916, and then that means that she pays back £63.18 per month on her student loan. And then we've got Reese, who earns £30,000 per year, and his income before tax is £2,500 per month, and his repayment is just over £25 a month. And then there's Emma. She's earning £25,000 per year, which is under the threshold we spoke about. Her income before tax is £2,083 per month, and therefore, because she's under the threshold, she's paying nothing towards her student loan. Sometimes it can seem daunting looking at these figures and percentages, but when it's broken down and we see the reality in the grand scheme of things, it isn't a lot to be paid out of a monthly salary. And in the terms of the opportunities that it opens up to students, it is vast. And I do appreciate that I've just thrown a lot of information at you, and this is just a starting point. So would recommend going away and, as I've said many times, looking at the Student Finance website and asking any questions in that chat box that we mentioned, in the question and answer box. There should be plenty of time left for questions, so I'm hoping that's the case. And also, if you could, there's a link in the question and answer session for feedback. So if you could just pop some information in there to give us some feedback about the session so that we can improve these sessions. There's also a QR code here, so if you wanted to just scan the QR code, you can access the form there. But thank you for listening. As I say, if there's any questions, pop them in the chat and we'll try and help. And also on that feedback form, there is an option to ask any questions. So if there's anything that's a bit more personal or more specific that you want advice on, we can always pass that on to the Money Advice team to get back to you at a later stage for those more specific personal questions. And that's the end from me. So I'll pass back to Jo, and then we'll go over to the question and answer session.
Great.
Oops.
Right, bear with me. Thanks, Louise. Just get rid of the echo. I have to mute you, Louise. Sorry. Yeah, thank you so much. It is a very complicated topic to kind of explain. So you did well there explaining it very simply with all those figures, etc. So I mean, our advice from the college is to just as soon as applications open, do get started on it, because problems do come up, and if you leave it to the last minute, that just does complicate matters. There was a question that came up that I've answered directly to the person, but it might also apply to other people. So someone's asked if they haven't heard from all their university choices, how can they apply? Well, the advice there is that you can still apply, and you should still apply, and just put down the university. I mean, Cheryl, you can correct me if I'm getting this wrong, but just put down the university that you think you're most likely to go to, and then you can make changes in your student finance account after you've submitted the application, because a lot of students will change universities. So a lot of students will make applications through clearing, for example, in August. So obviously universities change, so you can change it. So don't let that delay your application. So hopefully that's that question answered. So I'm just quickly checking through the other questions.
Yeah, we agree with that, Joe, as well. I think Cheryl would nod away just to get the application in. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, so there is a question here about there's a couple of questions actually about individuals who are on universal credit, and can they still get the maintenance loan? I don't know if Cheryl, you want to answer that one?
Yep, I can answer that if you want to. Hello. Just one thing before I answer that question, actually, because it's literally hot off the press. Student loan applications are opening next week. So wow. That's what we just heard. So yeah, if you're going to apply, please do as soon as it opens. Doesn't matter if you don't know what course, university, whatever, just put something down, preferably your first choice, and get the application processed. So just wanted to say that. So there is a question, and one of the questions, I'm on universal credit and I have a child, will I still get the maintenance loan? Yes, you will. You'll find that your funding will, or your income, I should say, will predominantly switch over to student financing and funding. That'll become your main source of income. So you'll get the maintenance loan and you probably get a higher rate of maintenance loan. And if you've got a child, you get the parents' learning allowance as well. You can still be assessed for universal credit, so it doesn't like it just stops completely, but they will take into account part of your student funding as an income. So you may find that it does change what you're entitled to from universal credit, but don't forget you've got your income from student finance to kind of help supplement that. What I suggest you do, because benefits can be a little bit complicated, is to get an estimate of what your student funding is going to be, and I or whoever can help you with that, and then pass that information on to your benefits provider and just say, I'm intending to be a full-time student. This is what my student funding is estimated to be. Can you give me an idea of how that will affect my universal credit or your benefits?
Brilliant. Thank you, Cheryl. There's no way I could have answered that in such detail.
There's another question as well about universal credit, so I'll just read that one. I also live alone and private renting. Already universal credit pays for my housing benefit. So the main rule when it comes to students and benefits is, unfortunately, students cannot claim benefit. That's because they are receiving student finance funding and that's now their source of income. There are some exceptions to that rule. So, for example, with the other person that I was answering, it sounds like they have a child. So, for example, if you are a lone parent or have children, that is one of the exceptions to the rule where you are a student and you can claim benefit. If you are disabled as well and receive disability benefits, that's another case where you can apply for and receive benefit. But aside from these few sort of exemptions, I'm afraid full-time students are not eligible to claim benefit.
Okay, I'm just working my way through some of the questions here. Okay, so there's a question here which again might apply to quite a few people, well, some people. So, I'm divorced, my child lives with her mother, so things will be calculated on her mother's income, question mark.
Yeah, but so I am divorced, my child lives with her mum. Yes, it will be. So if you are divorced and your child lives with predominantly the one parent, it will be assessed on their household income, so just the one, not the two.
Okay, brilliant. So is the 9% repayment fixed, or might it change over the lifetime of the loan?
The 9% repayment is currently fixed. I can't guarantee what might happen in the future, but generally speaking, it's been like that for absolutely years. They are very unlikely to change anything when you are under a current system. So in one system, you generally 9 times out of 10 stay in that system. But if there are changes, it will probably be for the new students in that new intake when that happens.
And I think that he's actually the person actually said, and does that apply also to the 3% interest on the loan?
That can vary. Interest rates can vary, and it's also done on retail price index as well, which can vary. So just keep an eye on that. But I wouldn't really worry about the interest, to be honest with you, when you think about the whole debt, which does sound really scary as the figures are high. But, you know, as Louise, you know, pointed out as well, it's not about how much you owe. It's about, you know, what your income is and what you pay. So you could have someone that owes £50,000, someone that only owes £10,000. Those monthly repayments are going to be the same because it's based on what you're earning. And, you know, the repayments are really so low when you think about the whole debt that you have. You know, if we might have mortgages and bank loans and things like that, we would certainly not get as good deal, and certainly it doesn't get wiped off. Or if we, you know, lose our income, you know, we would still have to pay. So I know it sounds really weird to say that student loans are a good debt, but in this case, it is.
Yeah, it is.
Excellent. So what tax year is relevant for the household income assessment for a student starting this September?
Always have to double check my little notes here, but for students starting this September, it's the 1920 tax year.
Okay. Okay, so we've got one here that comes up quite a lot. So yeah, what do I do if this happens a lot at the sixth form of sitting institute? What do I do if my passport is expired and I don't have a national insurance number? I guess that's for the ID.
Yeah, so if your passport has expired, then Student Finance won't be able to accept it. The only other form of ID evidence they will accept is birth certificate. Now with that, it's a little bit more complicated. You have to send in your original birth certificate, but you also need to complete a birth certificate verification form. That has to be completed by another person, and that is similar to when you get your passport. It has to be completed by a person of good standing and someone that's known you for, I think, at least 2 years, etc. But that needs to be completed and sent in, as well as the original birth certificate. You might want to consider renewing your passport if that's potentially an option. I know there is a cost to that, but just because if you've got a passport, it does make things so much easier with your application and you don't have to send it in. So in the ideal world, have a valid passport, but if not, don't worry, you can go down the birth certificate route. National insurance number is needed, by the way. So if you don't have one, then you will need to inquire and to get one, because it is needed as part of the student funding application.
Yeah, I mean, I know that this applies for my son's in year 12, and he got emailed a national insurance number. You don't get emailed your actual little plastic card anymore, I don't think. So you should have it somewhere. Okay, so just double checking the student loan cover travel expenses. Well, I mean, the student maintenance loan is for you to do what you want to do with it, isn't it? So
absolutely, yeah, the maintenance loan is paid into your account, so how you spend that is up to you. But certainly if you've got travel expenses, so perhaps you're commuting to university, or even if you live at your university but you know you're going to need to go home at certain times in a year, they are costs that you are going to need to factor in. So do think about travel costs when you are planning your budget and working out how to, you know, cover your maintenance loan to cover all your expenditure. Also though, do check for student discounts as well with travel. So, you know, whether it's a student bus card, rail card, or even, you know, depending on university as well. I know with Anglia Ruskin, we have our own sort of deals with local bus and train companies as well. That could be quite useful. So definitely take advantage of being a student and access student discounts. And that's for everything, not just travel, shops, cinema, when we're allowed, everything.
Yeah. And Cheryl, I think the NHS, they have their own expenses side for the courses, don't they? So yeah, if it's an NHS course, it might be.
Yeah, so if you're doing an NHS course, you're on a placement, then you may be able to get some of your placement travel reimbursed.
And that's what Freshers Week's all about, isn't it? When you start university, you get bombarded with various discounts and offers and free pizzas, all sorts of things.
The best part.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got a question here about, so if one parent is retired, does their pension contribute towards the total household income?
Essentially, student finance will want to take into account the gross taxable income from the household. So presumably that would be yes.
Okay. We've got a question here about, so some students here may be choosing a course which involves a year abroad. How does that work? Do students still get a maintenance loan for that year abroad?
They can do, yes. So don't be shy if you want to study abroad. Then that's really good opportunity, I would say, for your own personal development and good experience. But certainly, yeah, student funding is still available if you want to study abroad. But also, again, check with your university as well. They might have bursaries and scholarships and grants that may help you as well. I know at Anglo Ruskin we currently do, so it is definitely worth checking.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, and does income get assessed every year? So you do a fresh income assessment in your second and third year?
You do, definitely. Yeah. You need to apply every academic year for your funding.
Okay. We've got a question here about we've got a question here about graduate entry to medicine. Now yeah, I'm not sure about that. But student, yeah, do you understand? Know much about that?
There's sort of two different routes into medicine, I believe. There's one where you can go in as a graduate. I mean, sorry, I haven't worded that very well. You can do the course as a graduate, and we do that. We have many graduates at Anglo Ruskin doing our medicine degree, but there is a limitation in funding insofar as they cannot access the tuition fee loans, but they can access the maintenance loans. But I believe, and this is why I don't know much about it, which is why I'm getting a little bit confused, there is another route into medicine as a graduate entry. It's like a slightly different course, but because we don't do that at Anglo Ruskin, that's why I have no idea really what that is, I'm afraid. Okay. But generally speaking, yes, graduates can do medicine, but just be careful because there's no fee loans.
Yeah, brilliant, thank you. So what if after results day students decide they don't want to go to university? Is it fine just to cancel the loans?
Absolutely, nothing gets paid until you're actually at university and you're registered and you've confirmed that you're here.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, so any consideration for single parent households, as even though the income might be high, the actual disposable income is not?
Yeah, this is a bit of a tough one. It's student finance literally will just look at the gross taxable income in that household. They do not take into account any discretion with expenditure or disposable income that the household may have. That's not to say that there may not be extra support, but that wouldn't come from student financing, and that could possibly come from scholarships and bursaries that universities offer. Some of them are based on income, but some of them aren't. For example, Anglo Ruskin, we have a hardship fund, which is not based on household income, but just based more on the personal circumstances and the needs of that particular student. But I would, say as well, encourage your child to start saving now and to work as well whilst they're a student. That is the biggest and best way to increase their student funding and their student income by working. I know it's a little bit difficult at the moment, but there are still jobs out there and obviously things will change.
And I think that links into another question. I mean, someone's asked, perhaps if you're not eligible for much of the maintenance loan and your parents are expected to contribute but maybe can't contribute as much as what you hoped, then I suppose what do you do then? How to boost your income? But that links back to basically, getting those part-time jobs and trying to sort of boost your income and use the hardship fund if it's a real issue.
Any funds that you can apply to, and I would look outside university as well. I know there's the website called Turn to Us, and they have a grant search actually on there. Anyone can use it. It's not just for students, but you can use it to find educational grants. And it could just be because you live in a certain place or go to a certain sixth form, or your parents had a certain, career in something. It's not necessarily based on hardship whatsoever. Many years ago I went to university, and it was a long time now, but I literally got a small grant just because I attended a sixth form in this certain area, and for some reason there'd been a grant set up to help students that were attending this sixth form to go to university. So my parents' income wasn't looked at all. It's literally just because I was at sixth form. So it's worth checking, it's worth finding, but certainly working is the best way to supplement your income. I look at student bank accounts as well. They're really good. They offer freebies to open the account, generally to get you to open the account, so good incentive. But they can also offer interest-free overdrafts as well. And again, it sounds a bit weird to sort of talk about overdrafts, because normally we sort of go, oh no, that's like a debt. But with student accounts, they are interest-free, they're fee-free. So, and they can be up to like £3,000, possibly more. So they are potentially a good way to either supplement an income or to have as a buffer should you need it. And we always encourage students, don't be shy to go into it if you need to. Again, these are one of these rare circumstances where we would say no, it's fine.
Brilliant, thank you. We've got a couple of questions here about, I suppose, eligibility to the disability support, sort of student disability fund. Is it, so someone's, I think someone's asked about sort of visual impairment and also a chronic medical condition. Would they be considered eligible for the extra? How is that assessed, the eligibility for that?
I'm going to actually have to put my hand up and just say that even though I'm a money advisor, we don't actually have anything to do with the DSA.
Okay.
And that's completely done with our disability and dyslexia team. But I had just had a quick look on the website, so I obviously have an understanding of it. But sort of for increment details about eligibility, do you go on the government website or just Google, DSA payments, and it's quite informative on there. And it does sort of say, certain conditions so you can have it, if you're visually impaired or deaf, or if you're dyslexic, and what possibly you could get. So I'm sorry I can't answer your question specifically, but the information is definitely out there.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, so we've got a question here again. We'll just do a few more, or a couple more, about are you eligible for student finance if you are European? So that is linked to, I guess, whether you've got the settled or pre-settled status.
Yes, it certainly is. Yeah, it's all changing, unfortunately. It's getting more and more complicated as well. It's not completely set in stone. We're waiting on regulations to go through and be approved. But our understanding is that if you have EU SS, either settled or pre, you should still be able to access student funding, whether that's just the tuition fee loan or whether that could be the tuition fee loan and the maintenance loan. It will depend on your status that you have.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. So there'll be a thorough assessment of that, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah. I think we've apologies if we haven't answered every single question, but we will download all of these questions that have been asked, and we will reply to any that we feel that we haven't answered. But I think, yeah, thank you so much. To have your expertise here, Cheryl, and Louise is invaluable, because it is such a complicated topic and everyone's circumstances are so individual. But let me put myself, so I'll put my face back up there now.
Yes, Jo, I was just going to say, if anyone does have any specific questions that they haven't put in that they do have, they can pop those in the feedback form as well, and we can get back to them direct if they wanted to. We can ask for an email address and get back to them.
Brilliant. Yeah, so do have a look at that. We're in the right at the very top of the announcements in the Q&A. We've got a link there to a form, which is what Louise is referring to. So yeah, so do put any other queries in that and we can get back to you. But as I say, the career service at Candy is here to support you as well. So we're here to help. So students hopefully should know how to book an appointment with us. Yeah, they can have a one-to-one, etc. But this has been recorded. We've got a careers YouTube channel if you haven't discovered it already. So that's where we put up all of our talks for students. So I really recommend you subscribe to that, because there's loads and loads of really useful information about kind of making choices, student finance, all sorts of things, lots of subject related things. So hopefully there's something for everyone. But yeah, so I think if there's no further, I don't think there's any. Yeah, I think we'll
there's
stop there.
Here that's quite good, actually, Jo.
Oh,
It
okay.
says, it says, I'm planning on doing a course that's 4 years, but I also want to do a postgrad course. Would I be able to have a loan for postgrad? So I just wanted to confirm that they are able to, aren't they, Cheryl? And it's separately done.
It's separate, yeah. So you can get your funding for your undergraduate degree, and then you can apply for the funding for your postgraduate degree. Actually, that's just something, if I can just quickly point out. I know we've sort of said you can get funding for up to 4 years. What we mean by that is that most courses are 3 years long. So what it really is, though, is you can get funding for the ordinary duration of your course +1. So it's a 3-year course like most are. That's why we say 4 years. But if it's a 4-year course, you can actually get funding for up to 5. So just wanted to make that clear, because I know it can seem a little bit confusing. If you are going to do a placement year course or it's a 4-year course, you might think, I haven't got my extra year, but you do. And as I said, postgraduate funding, completely separate.
Brilliant, thank you. And I've just spotted another question. We could keep going on and on here, but I will just answer this one. So it says, will I need to provide a proof of settled status when applying for loans? Now, I actually attended something the other day that I think students, when they're filling out the form, will have to enter a code, I think, to prove that they're settled or pre-settled.
That's for the EUSS, yeah. If you've got settled status in some other way, so if you're not a European national, but you've got settled status in UK, such as indefinite leave to remain, then you will need to provide evidence of that. But if it's through the EUSS scheme, then yeah, there is like a code that you'll need to supply to Student Finance, so they can all check that sort of behind the scenes.
Yeah, so it will all become clear, I'm sure, as you start filling out the form. Okay, so brilliant. So yeah, so just a final thank you for everyone involved. We hope that was really useful to everyone, and to say we will get back to anyone who we feel, if you feel that your questions haven't been answered, fill the form out, and yeah, have a nice rest of the evening. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, everybody.